the shooting.
I'll give you a card to his barber later.
Seriously.
I'll turn you on, you bastard. You live.
Keep it mean. Yeah. All right, listen, I don't see myself on the TV yet, but
I don't know what's going on, man.
Did
like,
you switch it?
Like, what?
Oh,
there you go.
Wait.
What the hell? What the? You know
What?
What? This is all screwed up. You're just going to have to just tell people who you got.
All right, no, I'll go. But first, I want to give a special thanks to all the sponsors. I want to thank KBar.com. I want to remind everybody to go check us out everywhere podcasts are listened to. If you get time and you want to buy some freedom, head over to KBar.com. We have a special guest in today. He's a friend. He's a true champion. I'm going to get emotional. He represents a brand that's very near and dear to me because it's near my home. The one and only Max Michel. This is great. That's as exciting as it gets. So this is awesome. So I'm under strict rules about what we can and can't talk about. No, I'm kidding. But I managed to sneak Max in here for about an hour. It's going to be really tight. But we're going to talk about some cool shit. I want to get into this, and I want to ask him right away. He's been through such a crazy journey all the way to the top, and I look at him and I watch how he trains and I watch the things that he does. Now he's tapping lights and he's moving around and he's doing all these crazy drills and everything's being documented and he's doing so much cool stuff. How the hell did you get here and get to this point in life?
For me, it's like sometimes I sit back and I wonder, am I even really here right now? But I tell you, it's been my father. My dad got me started really young. I was 5 years old and I had a gun in my hand. That's kind of how I grew up in shooting down in South Louisiana. It's been a way of life forever. Very blessed and fortunate to do that. But after 5 years of being with, after getting my first firearm at 5 years old, I started watching my dad shoot, and I wanted to be like Dad, right? You want to do things with Dad. So 5 years old, getting your first firearm, getting to hang out with him on the weekends. He started competing when I was about 5 years old. So after that, I was the guy on the range picking up brass, loading mags, doing all the things on the range that needed to be done without pulling the trigger. And when I was about 8 years old, I said, hey, this is something I want to do. Can I give it a try? And once I proved that I was safe, I started competing at 8 years old. And, it just the story goes on from there. And, from 8 till about 13, we just kind of hung out within Louisiana, traveled around, shot some matches. And
before you get past 8 years old, in Louisiana, does everybody have teeth?
Yes.
Can you dispel some of the myths of Louisiana? Because there's a lot of people out there that, you don't come off as Louisiana. People have these preconceived notions, but everyone has teeth, right?
Correct, man.
Everyone
we all
has
have teeth. We all take care of ourselves very well.
You have dental.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We're just checking.
Work for a great company.
So you're 8 years old. You get the bug. That's when the bug sets in.
Man. Yeah.
And you're totally bought in. You're like, Dad. Now, is this the age where you start saying, Dad, I want a Colt Python, or how does it go? Are you a collector and you're shooting matches, or are you full blown reloading at this point?
Yeah, so my dad, he's all in, man. He reloads. He,
Psycho.
He's a complete psycho. Growing up, we had our own gun shop in the backyard with several loading machines, and so literally, I was shooting 4 days a week, and the other 2 or 3 days or so, I was loading ammo, loading primer tubes, cleaning guns. I mean, we were all in at a young age.
Speaking of which, have you ever been in the back of JJ's shop? It's like a Filipino sweat factory. Speaking of which,
He knows the deal. He started young too.
Yeah. Besides that, no, I know. Besides that, so you're going through and you're getting the bug, and your dad's like Rambo in the cave. He's got he's got you grinding it out. And at this point, because I know how big a student of the game you are you whittling your own guns at this point, or are you still buying them over the counter?
We were definitely plinking at that point. We were definitely tinkering, and we were messing around with some stuff, probably making things worse than better.
Right, right.
But I loved it, man. Because the high school I went to, my gunsmith was on the same street as my high school. So as soon as I got out of school at like 2:15 or whatever it was, I was going down to see my gunsmith for a couple hours every day until my dad picked me up on his way home from work. And so I just loved firearms forever.
That's awesome. That's just so cool. And then you go. At what age do you start competing like at the highest of high levels? Because you know me, I don't know shit about this stuff. You got to talk to me.
You don't know much about anything, but
no, I know a lot. I know a lot about a little. About
words right out of my mouth.
Buffet. No, go ahead.
You got it. No, I think I guess I knew I had an opportunity to
hit the high level.
To hit the high level at about 13 years old. I started winning matches against some of the men in my area. Started winning, and kind of going back. I started when I was competing at 8 years old. It was a man-on-man steel challenge event. And what that means is you got 5 plates, I have 5 plates, and whoever knocks them down first wins. So there's a lot of mental, toughness that goes into that, man. And so I did that for probably 2 years, and then I started competing in USPSA and IPSC, which is the United States Practical Shooting Confederation, or not United States Practical Shooting Association, and the IPSC is kind of the governing body of that. But with that said, that mental toughness helped me so much for so many years, and I still compete in those kind of events today. But once I got to probably 13, I started realizing, hey, I got a chance to do this. If I put away football, baseball, basketball, track, all the other sports, put them away, focus, and make a conscious effort to be the best in the world with a handgun at 13 years old, I got a chance to do this. And I started winning some local matches, but when I was 15, I won my first state level championship, or major match, you can say. I won Louisiana State, then I won Mississippi State the next week, and I started becoming, getting on the map at that point.
Did the old timers want to kill you? Were they like, "Who's this fucking little punk"?
No, I think initially everybody was totally cool with me. They thought it was neat to have a young guy.
By 17, they wanted to knife you.
There you go. That's when you start seeing who the real friends were.
This is important. At what point were you like, I can make a living doing this? Because that's different, where you start to say, like, you might think it as a kid. Like when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be an astronaut. And you know what I mean? Then you kind of like, okay, that's not going to happen. But at what point were you like, I can make bread doing this?
When you're 13, you have those dreams, right? You have those goals. And my mom was like, yeah, follow your dreams. When does it come real? Follow your dreams. But she always said, have a backup plan. Because, but when it became real for me was when I was about 16 years old. I got a letter in the mail from the U.S. Army that said, hey, man, if you want to be a part of the U.S. Army Marksmanship Unit, we'd love to have you join the Army and be a pro shooter. So when I was 16, I thought, man, I got this letter. What can I do with it? I had to convince my parents, hey, guys, my 17th birthday, with both parents' consent, I can join, and I can be a part of this amazing organization. And that's when I realized that it was real. Like, I can be a pro shooter. Maybe not at the level that I wanted to be at yet, but I can be a pro shooter and get that foot in the door and work for the greatest organization in the world, the U.S. Army.
At the height of this, when you were building it, because there's a lot of myths out there about you. You have some of the Bo Jackson thing going on, like you've jumped over buildings and stuff. How many rounds were you shooting a month?
Back then in the Army?
Like at the height of this.
Oh, man, at the height of it.
At the height of the training.
Before the war kicked
before
off.
Kids,
man.
before everything, life set in.
Yeah, absolutely. I was shooting, man, it's crazy to say, I was shooting sometimes 20,000 rounds a month. Yeah.
Q, did you hear that?
Crazy. My elbow hurts today because of it.
That's unfathomable.
Yeah, man.
Now, would unmitigated gall.
Yeah, that's seriously. So you go into the Army marksmanship team, and you do that. This is a different point now, Max. At what point? Now you know you can make bread doing this. Okay, It starts to click. Things are coming together. At what point are you like, I can break Guinness Book of World Records doing, like I can break records. Like I'm smoking fools. At what point?
I would say probably when I was about 20 years old or so is when I started to be able to beat my heroes, which was a crazy time for me. You know, I started looking around thinking, man, these are the guys I've always wanted to be like. These are my Michael Jordans. And, you know, it just was crazy. And at that point I thought, hey, I do have what it takes, and I obviously have the work ethic and dedication, but more importantly, I had the love and the passion for the game, that it didn't matter how hard I needed to work. And still to this day, I still feel that I'm one of the hardest working guys in my industry because I just love it. And once you get that passion for it, it's easy to reach success. And surrounding yourself with the right people, I was able to continue. And so I guess about 20 years old, I thought I can do this.
So at about 17, the locals hate you. At about 22, the pros start to hate you.
Dude, I'm telling you, it is wild because like some of the guys you look up to, and you're like, man.
They turn on you.
They turn on you, dude, and I don't want to be that guy. Now, I'm sitting here before you now at almost 38 years old. I've been doing this for almost 30 years, competing, and 20 years as a pro. I don't want to be that guy that turns on the young guys.
You know what it is? I just, okay, so Tony said this once, and I've heard you have to take a page from The Rock, right? Like you just got to smile at people and you just smile, and you just, Max, it gets harder and harder, but you just, hey man, I wish you luck. You have to accept, kind of certain things, but you know how this industry is. We don't have to get into that, but this industry is very juvenile. It's safe to say it's very juvenile. Everybody has something to say about everybody. I've come to the conclusion in life that I will only judge people based on my experience with them. That's how I like to operate, because I feel the firearms industry is about 5 years behind every other industry in terms of maturity. Everybody, you got to give people about 5 years in the industry to mature and grow and kind of reach a point where they kind of understand and accept their place in the universe, because I think that's the struggle. Because you have a lot of people that, it's like I got told when I got into a locker room in college, they said, look around. Everybody in this locker room was somebody where they came from. Remember that. And it's the same kind of thing. Everybody, when you guys go to these matches, is hot shit back home at their local club, wherever it is. So then a guy like you comes along, and I'm talking about at 20, 22 years old, and you start murking fools out there. And everybody's like, who is this kid and what is he doing? And, of course, initially it's all love and hugs. And then after you start taking home the trophies and getting the deals, and Sig comes along, and we'll get to that, it's not that they say anything to your face, and it's not that they mean to hurt. It might not be done with malice, but it's always a little bit of shade, right, Max? It's a little shade. It's always like, yeah, he's good, but it's always a yeah, but I like John, but he's not really a shooter. He's not really this. He's not really that. I'm not really anything. I'm the first to know that. But that's kind of how it's done, and that's how they do it. And you just got to smile, man.
And I tell you, it's unfortunate, man. There's, a few people in this world that, that are real, and there's other people out there who aren't. And it's sad, man, because I look at myself as, the current generation that I'm in. And by no means am I slowing down. Don't get that twisted with what I'm saying here. I'm obviously going to continue to work hard. I want to be the best guy in the world with a handgun for a long time. But at some point, man, I don't know how many championships I've won now. And I don't say that to be a jerk. I just say that I don't even look at what I've done. I'm worried about where I'm going. I'm worried about the next one. I want to chase the next one. But at some point, that next one's not going to be there for me. And that happens to everyone. But you have to do it in a way that's respectful to the game and respectful to the other people that are coming up behind you, that look up to you and that are trying to work just as hard as you.
I look at it like this, Max. I can't relate to the shooting side, but I look at it like this. When I got into this business, I looked up to guys like Steve Colston, who kind of started it. They were doing the covers, the writing, the stuff like that. Like they were the guys that were being photographed. They were out there. I had a spell where I was doing the marketing, doing the social stuff, working with a lot of brands behind the scenes, fighting for that respect. And I always, when I go up to Steve, I shake his hand and I say, you were the original, dude. Straight up. You were the original. Just all the guys, Chris Tran, just the guys that came up along the way before me and were, blogging and writing and developing the industry. Mike Seeklander is another one who, great guy. Just, instructing, but at the same time, doing a lot of that stuff. And I got into this space very early on. Tony Pignato and I had done a podcast together many moons ago we discontinued that, and then did some stuff at my last stop, and now here. And I get a lot of people that what I'm trying to do is just show the world how human people can be that shoot guns, and how real they can be. And they're good people. People like you, people like Julie Galoob, people out there that are great folks that go out and compete, and this is how they feed their family. And I think this is the steps that the industry needs to take, is start humanizing those behind the firearm and having open conversations and open dialogue. We need to get away from posting the cool guy photos on the internet and there's no background. But coming back to kind of the hate, and just some of that stuff, it's tough to overcome. Getting old is tough to overcome. All those things are tough to overcome. But like I say all the time, one person's excuse is another person's motivation. So you always have to want to push that envelope. You get people even in weight training and physical training, they say, oh, my kids, my back, my neck, my shoulder. Q knows what I mean. And then and then you have to use that as the fuel. You got to use it as the fuel. But you've done it for so long and done it so well. So you come out of the Army program. You're coming out of that Army program. You're kind of figuring out where the next stop is. At what point does SIG come into play? Because I know, and it's something that's near and dear to my heart, because I grew up training there, and we have so many common friends there. That's right in my backyard. At what point does that come into play, and you're like, okay, this is the pinnacle? Because it's got to be there, a Glock, or maybe, you know what I mean? It's the CZ, Beretta, all in the mix, but that's the Mecca.
Yeah, it's I would say probably so here's kind of the background story on that. 2005, we had the World Speed Shooting Championship in Piru, California, and SIG was a big sponsor there. Now, 2005, we're talking 13 years ago, 14 years ago, almost 15 years ago, right? So at this point, SIG is not the company it is today. Mm-hmm. But they were trying to get involved in the competitive shooting scene, and they offered a prize where if you broke the world records and you won the championship, you would win $10,000 from SIG and $10,000 from the Outdoor Channel. And, I'm from New Orleans. This was the year of Katrina as well. So we had a whole lot of things going on in the family. We lost everything like days before this event. Literally, the house I grew up in is just an empty lot now. I mean, we lost everything.
So you got to win. This is the come up.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So well, I wasn't even going, dude. Honestly, I was in where was I? I was in Ecuador competing when all this was going down, and I got back home and I see my family, my relatives, everyone, they're at my house. They're evacuated, and we get back to New Orleans to go help kind of salvage what we could, find all the guns and find everything. And I just remember my dad saying, hey, when are you leaving? I'm like, dude, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. I'm right here, dude, to do whatever we need to do to help the family. And he's like, man, you have to go to the match and blah, blah, blah. He does this whole spiel.
Fuck you, you're going.
Yeah. So anyway, I find myself there. I win the world championship, which was incredible, but you needed to break what they call the impossible 72 seconds. And I think I shot like 72 and change or something. So I just barely missed it. So I won the championship. I won a good bit of money, but I didn't win the extra 20 grand, right? Because it was impossible to do. Nobody can do it, whatever. The next year we go back. It's 2006. Some guy named JJ won it. I don't even know who he is, but
never heard of him.
Never heard of her. So anyway, he won it, but he didn't break the record either, right? He didn't break that impossible record. And then the following year they added in another event, and they said, now you have 80 seconds to break it. The problem was that event they added wasn't an 8-second course of fire. It was more like a 9 or 10-second course of fire. So you had to be spot on.
So they don't want to give up the 20.
They don't want to give it up, dude. And they doubled the money. They said, we're doubling the money. Nobody's going to do it. So anyway, I go back in 2007. I win that world championship, the World Speed Shooting Championship, and I break all the records. I get all the cash. It's awesome. Great payday. It was on my wife's birthday, and one day of work I made like 40 grand. It was crazy.
You're like, we're moving on up, honey.
Yeah. So I was like, this is amazing. It was the biggest payday in all of shooting.
Sizzler.
Dental work.
Going to Sizzler, baby. Oh, and dental work, of course. But back then, dude, there was nothing else like that, and still to this day, they've never done it again. By the way, so I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing that I won the money. But long story short, SIG had to put up all that money, or most of it, and they called me, the guy at the time, Bud Feeney, who hired me at SIG. Awesome person, awesome guy. Man, I wish he was still there with us, but he's moved on to retirement and doing other things in life and sporting clay and whatnot and having a good time. But he called me and said, hey, who's this guy that I'm writing this big check to? Because I at least want to know who he is and if he's a good person. So that's kind of how we met. And we hit it off, man, ever since. And he had me come in for a couple interviews at SIG. I was extremely impressed with the company. I was extremely impressed, more importantly, with the people. It's crazy, man. Like, I've been to a lot of other gun companies. seen a lot of other factories, but there was no other place that I fit. You know, being in my military background, I felt like, man, I have a home here. These guys are all pulling in the same direction. And at that time, we were a 226, 229 type of a company. We didn't have half the
Classic
stuff
line,
we
yeah.
have. That was it. So, but I can't tell you, I can't sit here in front of you and say, yeah, I saw we were going to get the military contract and we were going to be this and that. But what I can tell you is that I saw the people there were like no other people, man. Just extremely passionate.
You know, it's. I try to explain it to people all the time. I'm like, I tell people I came up in the old gun industry, and you know, Sig, Smith & Wesson, they were still all alive and well. And you know how New England is. It's old, stodgy, skeet and trap type joints. But Sig was always like Disney. Like when you went there, it was like going to Disney. And I tell people all the time to this day, I'm like, that's the Mecca. That's the model.
It's crazy.
You know, it's a crazy place. I mean, they literally own the town that they sit in. It's literally their town. And they do it. You know, they do a great job. Tom's done a phenomenal job there. The whole team's done a great job there. I mean, they're definitely, I think at the time, wasn't it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Max, I think it wasn't like CZ, like the big name on the scene or something around that time, like 06, 05. It was something like that.
From the competitive side?
Yeah,
of
from the
things?
competitive side.
Yeah, I would say CZ, STI. Though, you know, Smith & Wesson was playing around in that field at that moment because they had a bunch of guys on Team Smith.
Yeah.
So you saw them as well. They were probably the larger gun company that was putting out some pros, but yeah, Glock as well was doing it too.
You know, the last couple of years, and I'm not saying this to jar a reaction out of you, but I get the vibe almost like Smith & Wesson's in trouble. Like I get the feeling, you know what I mean, Max?
Yeah, I don't know anything about that, but I can just tell you that, man, I just think SIG is just on another level.
Yeah,
dude.
but that's what I mean. I mean, when we always looked at like the big 3 or 4, Smith was always in there, but I got to tell you, the last couple of shows and seeing the line, and I love you, Julian. I love the team over there, but you just get the feeling like it's almost a little scary. You know, they've made a couple deals that, but you know, you look at the booth and it's almost like starting to become like the sad clown. And I'll say it, I know you won't, but I mean, I know you'll keep it straight. But I feel like, and I hate to see that.
Yeah, well, yeah, you hate to see it with anybody in our industry, right? But I just think that's where we're at right now in our industry. It's not thriving. It's not like, that's why I'm very fortunate to be with SIG, because a lot of my buddies are being laid off, man, in other places, and it's just not, you know, it's sad. It's what it is right now.
So you get to SIG and good things are happening and it starts coming together for you. Do you know from day one that that's where you're going to be and you're going to stay forever?
That's the way that I've always seen it. That's the way that I've always wanted it. I'm a very, very loyal person. You know, I try to look at guys who stay at a certain spot. Maybe a Tom Brady, dude's 40-something years old, still slinging it, and he has no, you know, wants or needs to go anywhere else. That's who I want to be. I want to be the guy. You know, in my industry, that guy is Rob Latham. I'm sure you guys have heard of him, seen him. He's a pretty amazing, you know, shooter, pretty amazing person. But the most important thing that I think through all of it is that he stayed with Springfield through everything. He was the first guy to get a big deal, you know, and he's been there, I don't know, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, he's a cornerstone.
I mean, that's who I want to be, and I think it's important to do that. I think if you bounce around as a pro shooter, if you bounce around from company to company, it doesn't say an awful lot about yourself. It just doesn't.
It's hard. It's, you know, I feel all you guys' pain. You know, every time I have a guest in with a shooting background, it's not everybody hits a home run. You know, whether it's like, you know, Michel and Shane at Glock, or Ashley at a young age coming into Glock, you at SIG, and just Lena now, you know, getting in that position, where you feel comfortable that you can stay for a lot of years and it's the right decision. It's hard. A lot of guys have chased it for so long that when a payday does come along, they don't look at the end game or the long term and, you know, kind of like where they're going to lay their bones. You know, that's why I was super happy for JJ taking as long as he did to make his decision and kind of going through almost on an obnoxious level. He, you know, did the dance with a bunch of different brands and now finally settled. But it's hard. I mean, I listen to Taryn sometimes tell some of the stories. I mean, people like not living, but like pretty much sleeping in their cars, going to competitions.
Yeah, I mean, to be a pro shooter is not, and I mean, I'm sure most people know. I mean, there's a very few of us. I bet if we sat here and wrote down some names, we'd probably come up with maybe 10 that are doing it for a living. But there's a lot of pro shooters, a lot more than 10 of us, you know, but there's dudes out there that are driving and going everywhere and teaching classes every weekend. That could be one level of a pro shooter, but I'm talking about a guy who actually works for a company and gets to do what he loves.
Oh, yeah. Tony and I one
day
day made a list. We were sitting around BS and we were like, how many guys do you think shoot? And they're on ranges. They spend most of their time on ranges, and that's what they do.
Yeah.
It's a small
It's
list.
very small, man, and that's another reason why I think it's important when you get with a great company, you better do everything you can, and if that means taking a little bit less, I hope nobody's watching and listening, agent-wise, but
Yeah.
if that means taking a little bit less to stay with the right people, man, by all means, just because somebody's going to pay you an extra couple bucks is not the best thing because you're thinking long-term, right? And I got 3 kids. I got 3 people I got to put through college. I'm not thinking, hey, I want to get paid today. I'm thinking about I want to work with an amazing company, do what I love, and never work a day in my life.
But you're also a guy that's a student of the game. I could see you. I don't know if you'd ever move the family up north, but I could see you at SIG for a very long time. Whether that's at 45 or 50, when you decide I'm gonna ask you when growing old is, you transition to a situation where maybe you're in the building, because you're gonna be one of those guys, in my opinion, that's gonna get to a point where for a very long time you're gonna be the guy whose hand people want to shake coming in the building, because you've done so much, and I'm not here to stroke you, but you've done so much that it's really super impressive to anybody in the shooting game that knows who you are and knows what you're about. And you've created a true level of professionalism that a lot of people strive to reach. And I think SIG knows that. I think that the brain trust there know that. And I would hope that at any point you could go up there and you could be instructing if you wanted for a long time. I mean, you might be one of those guys that's, hey, I want to go to Top Gun and I want to teach, whatever it is. And I could see you doing that. I just don't know if they'd ever get you out of NOLA because that's you.
Well, it's home. New Orleans is home. Spent 10 years in the Army at Fort Benning, Georgia. And when we started having kids and moving, kind of traveling so much while I was there, my wife was by herself with the kids. So I just said, hey, look, when it's time to move, we're going to move somewheres. And it's going to be somewheres where you would be happy in as well. So New Orleans we picked. Obviously, after the hurricane, we picked the best spot that we can pick when we moved back in 2009. And it's family, man. That's where everybody's at. But and that was one of the conversations I had with SIG at a very early in my career was, would I move to New Hampshire? And at that moment, and still to this day, I'm very fortunate that they let me live where I want, and that happens to be New Orleans. As long as I'm close to an airport, I can get anywhere in the world for SIG and do whatever they need me to do, literally at a drop of a hat. They call me today, hey, man, we need you in Texas right now. I'm there. Wherever they need me, I'm going to be. But, yeah, I mean, I love being a part of SIG, and I hope to stay there I've been there almost 10, I guess a little over 10 years now. And, man, I'd love to be there another 10 or 20 if they let me.
But Max, there's good colleges there. It's
Look,
beautiful.
I love that part of the country. Absolutely love it. I was just there last week, and I mean, absolutely love that part of the country. I mean, I'm not a cold guy. I'm not I'm obviously from Louisiana, but I'm more of a southern guy. But, man, I absolutely love that part of the country. Some of the greatest vacations that we have as a family is up in the Northeast.
Live free or die.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's a super cool environment. So the SIG thing happens and pops off and everything starts clicking. Talk to me about the Guinness Book of World Records and how that came about, because everybody kind of, gets blown away by that, and you see the clip and it's just super impressive and you're constantly breaking your own record, which is even funnier.
Yeah.
When does that creep into your mind that you want to take a run at that, and how does that take shape?
I think everybody as a kid at some point thinks to do something with Guinness, right? They're like, oh, I can do that. They look in the book, and it's something that we can all relate to. I'm a gun guy. Maybe everybody else on my street are not gun guys. Who knows? But we can all say Guinness Book of World Records, and everybody knows what that is. That's the highest level of whatever it is that you do. And I've won a lot of matches, man. I've won a lot of things. I'm very, very proud of my career. I'm very proud of what I've done, not just for me, but other people that I've helped along the way within my sport. But when you say Guinness, everybody can relate to it. So all the people at my kids' schools, the dads or whatever, when we're chatting and they're asking about it, excuse me, they can relate to it, right? Or even the kids. The kids don't know what I do. They could care less if you won. My kids I'm talking about, right? They can care less what championship you've won. They don't know what that means. But when they see that Guinness World Record hanging in Dad's office, they think that's cool and they want to show all their buddies. But so I think, it's something that we always wanted to do as a kid. But somebody presented the opportunity to me at SIG. Somebody who was in marketing at the time said, hey, we know you've been shooting plate rack since you've been 8 years old. Wouldn't it be cool to have a world record doing it? And I'm like, yeah, I guess that would be cool. How do we go about that? And it was a big process. It was not easy to do the Guinness World Record thing. But anyway, as we went through it and they explained it to me, the first thing I thought was, I was scared as hell, man. I'm like, holy shit, I gotta do this in front of the VPs and the CEO and the guy in his suit and tie, and you only get 3 tries to do it, and it's freezing cold. It's 20-something degrees in New Hampshire at the time, and it was a very big challenge. So immediately you're scared, you're frightened. But I think that's when you're at your best, you know, when you push to that limit and figure out how am I going to do this. And I trained hard, man, for that. And maybe it doesn't show it. I don't know, maybe it does, but I trained hard for that one specific moment because you only get 3 chances, good or bad. That's what you get.
It's crazy. It's pretty ridiculous, Q. I don't know if it's a clip you can pull up at some point, but and it's Googleable, but it is pretty crazy. Now, at what point, because now the big thing with you is training for longevity, and you're doing a lot of different shit. I see you tapping lights. I see you running in circles. You got a tiger chasing you. There's a, you know, you got
Going
all
after chickens.
You're running after chickens. There's all kinds of weird stuff happening. At what point do you start looking into more of this different type of training? What's the catalyst?
I think,
Age?
Exactly. I tell you, man, it was probably, I don't know, man, maybe 2006 or 2008, something like that. I was a slight heat casualty at an event in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's crazy hot, like 120 degrees, crazy humidity. And it was at that moment, I don't consider myself old now, but back then I was a really young guy, you know? And I'm like, man, if this can happen to me at a young age, I need to take care of myself. So at that moment, I started looking into, you know, doing more working out, more exercising, things like that. And then, but at some point, I realized I need more. I need to do more. So I started reaching out to personal trainers. And I've been through a few personal trainers. And but anyway, the guy that I'm with now, we're really into more of the cognitive thinking stuff.
Performance.
You know, I think you at some point you get to an age where you want longevity. So I'm not lifting crazy heavy weights. I'm not doing anything like that. But I want to be able to take care of my body and do what I want to do for a long time. I look at people in my industry, and I think, okay, what is old in my industry? I don't know. I mean, there's nobody out there like a Tom Brady, right? He's considered he should have been worn out 5 years ago. Everybody says, but he's still the best in my eyes. You know. So how do I get to his level and stay at his level? So I just started, you know, branching out and doing things that people aren't really doing in my sport. And I think too, people in my world, in my sport, nobody takes it as serious as I do. No, and I don't mean that as to be
No, I know what you mean.
There's very few people that treat themselves like an athlete. There's a few of us, and I say that with all respect, but there's very few people who take it to that level. And I want to find everything that I can find.
But Maxie, that's a reflection of the industry as a whole for a long time. And I know you know what I'm talking about. For a long time, it was the dusty buckle and boot guys, overweight, the belly hanging over the belt buckle, and they got a gun and they started running matches. Now, guys like you, guys like JJ, guys like Shane have raised the bar. You guys are so much more explosive in and out of the spots. You're moving, and you're putting a lot of those guys in the dust. And that's where a lot of that, I don't want to say hate or shade comes from, but they're just that side of the industry was known for a long time. I've talked about it. Pat McNamara's been talking about it for years. There's a lot of guys out there on the tack side that have been talking about it. There just wasn't a lot of guys that were taking a huge interest in taking care of their body, drinking enough water, you know, hydration, performance, stretching. I mean, I've been to ranges 7-8 years ago when I first got in the business, and it was a lot of that. In the last 5 years, now you see people stretching. You got people writing books on performance and movement. The dynamic is changing. Just the way we even instruct is changing. And I think you guys are bringing that out of people. The bar is being raised. It's like in the UFC. In the beginning, in the early days of the UFC, you had like, remember Q? You had like the bouncer. You had like the sumo wrestler. You had all these random people. Now, you have the UFC.
Legit sport,
you have the bar has been raised. You can't just walk in there. I mean, these guys now are black belts in multiple disciplines. So you have to rise up, and that's great for the sport. It's great for guys like you. We're coming out of kind of like, maybe if you'd call it the silver age to the golden age, and I think what you're seeing is a new standard. It's the new normal of what it has to be to perform. Now, I don't know how much of that's trickled over into all sides. I don't know if that's filtered all the way down to the top 50, but I guarantee you the top 25 are taking their performance extremely seriously.
Yeah, I think for me, it was like, you know, the fear of leaving something on the table, man. Like, I didn't want guys like JJ and all these other guys to be so far ahead that I felt like I was unprepared. Because when I'm on the range, and the reason why I think I've had a little more success than other folks out there consistently is because I legitimately feel I'm going to win. Not because I'm trying to be a cocky guy. It's because I put in the work, and I look around the range and I think, there's no way that these guys were doing what I was doing with 3 kids and so much stuff going on. You know, you hear people talk about making time and trying to find time. They can't find time. Well, you got to steal the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to just take it, and wherever you can, you got to do it. And I don't feel like I just feel like I'm doing everything that I can, so I feel prepared.
I've gotten into knockdown, drag-out fights with people that say I don't have the time. Legitimately. I've gotten into, like, legitimate arguments where I've lost, like, somebody would introduce me and they say, geez, you must work out. And I'm like, no shit. Like, and they're like, I wish I had the time. And I'm like,
Right.
You make the time. And they're like, well, I have kids. So? Yeah. And I'm like, you make the time. You have to raise that bar. You have to find it. I get up at 4 a.m. and work out. What did Arnold always say? Sleep faster. You know what I mean? That's what he used to say. Sleep faster. I mean, Tom Brady, like you said, he used the Tom analogy. He just, when he gets in the zone, and he's focused on his craft, because providing for his family and doing what he needs to do on the field is paramount. Now, I want to ask you this. I want you to take yourself, because there's a bunch of stuff I want to get to with you, and I know we got tight time, but take yourself out of the equation. Give me your 4 or 5 best shooters out there, because when people ask me, I always say Max is the best shooter in the world, in my opinion. JJ might be 1.5, Shane, my friends, guys I consider friends. And Casey Eusebio is another one I kind of look at, and I'm like, I love what he's doing. But who are your top 5 out there that you're always kind of keeping an eye on and watching what they do?
So you're talking right now?
Right now.
Okay, so currently, taking myself out of the equation.
Yeah, you have to take yourself out because you're going to be biased.
Yeah, of course. Well, the first name that comes to mind is Eric Raffel. I don't know if you know that name, or if your listeners have heard that name, but he's a gentleman out of France who doesn't lose very much. He's absolutely incredible. I think he's a 7-time IPSC world champion. One of the coolest things in my career that I've done is that I've beaten him. I'm one of very few people who have put a loss on his record. That was a pretty wild experience. But anyway, since then he's beaten me several times too. But so he's probably my number one guy that comes to mind. Obviously in the U.S. here, like you mentioned, you got guys like JJ. JJ's one of those guys who can pick up just about any firearm and shoot it and do really, really well with it on minimal training time. So I think that's really great to see. Obviously you mentioned Casey Eusebio. He's another great speed shooter out there. Shane Coley's a guy who's working really hard. Travis Tomasi is a good friend of mine. We trained together for many, many years. In fact, I hired him into the U.S. Army shooting team, and we worked together there for a long time. Blake Maguez is a good friend of mine out of Louisiana. That guy is probably the most naturally talented, gifted person I've ever shot with. He's incredible. He doesn't get any time to shoot. He's a full-time businessman, but yet, he's won a world championship, and he's won tons of other matches along the way, and he's pretty incredible what he can do. A little southern Louisiana boy there. I'm probably forgetting some good buddies of mine, but there's a handful of guys out there. I always like to tell people there's probably 1 to 2% of people that are winning 98 to 99% of the matches. And it's not because, you look at, same thing, man. You look at poker, and people think poker is luck. I played a little bit of poker over the years, and I haven't played in a very long time. But, you see the same names at the end table there, right, at the final table. And it's not because it's luck. Same thing in shooting. You have those same couple % of people out there that are at the highest level, and it's like, man, how are they doing it? And you need to find out why they're doing it and mimic it as best as possible, right? But yes, there's a handful of shooters out there, and I'm sure I'm probably forgetting a lot of guys, but those are some of the guys that come to mind right away.
No, those are great names.
They've been doing it for a while too, because I'm not the guy that'll tell you like, oh, this dude just won a championship. He's great. No, I want to see it for 10 years straight. Then you're great, right?
Now, I want to get into this because it's something that it's a conversation I have behind the scenes with a lot of different people, and especially lately, with some people at the NRA and whatnot. How do we save shooting sports? Because I have a theory on it, and I don't mean that it needs saving, Max, but I think you guys should be treated as athletes. I think you guys should be, like I said, if we were playing baseball, we'd be millionaires. If we were racing cars, we'd be millionaires. How do we get it, the IDPA, and how do we get the sport to be basically on ESPN? How do we get it there?
I think that's a culture thing, man. That's a country thing. It's not a sport issue. We can probably have a lot better marketing and a lot better exposure, but I think the marketing and exposure is lacking because it's not a common thing that people want to see. Now, if we can figure out the UFC format, because hey, at one point that was like, hey, we don't want to see people fighting on TV. Now it's an actual sport. But I think what I've tried to do is continue to work with the military and law enforcement and helping them in what they do. But I think if we can get more military and law enforcement involved, or at least on the law enforcement level, right? And I say at least because the military guys like to stay somewhat secretive and somewhat, kind of structured in what they do. But if we can have more of law enforcement competitions and show that, hey, this, we're out there and we're shooting and we're competing, and it's not just a bunch of random people with firearms in their hands. We have actual trained professionals doing this at some sort of a elite level, and then we can start branching in more of the civilian world. I think that would be ideal. But look, I think, man, this has been something we've been traveling and seeing for a long time. I would love to get more exposure for our world. But I can't have this conversation with everyone, because everyone I try to have this conversation with, either loves guns or they don't. There's really no in between. I married a girl who has never had a gun in her house, ever, until we moved in together, and there was tons of guns, and I'm dry firing every night, and it was a change for her. Now, I mean, she's obviously cool with guns. Guns pays her bills, but it was that initial shock and that initial change. So having that conversation with someone, and not only that, I think to have that conversation with people, I'm very dedicated in bringing in new people, not even into the sport, but new people into guns. Like I'll go through and work with some of the dads and some of the moms at my school. Hey, let me help you purchase your first firearm. Let me help you learn how to use that firearm.
Do they know what you charge an hour?
Yeah, I need to put my kids through school, but
Yeah.
nah, dude, I do everything for free for all my local guys, and I make sure that everybody's comfortable with guns, comfortable around firearms. I train their kids as well, not to be competitive shooters, but to be gun people, because we need more gun people in the world before we can get that exposure is what I'm getting at.
Now, I shared with you my theory on the humanization of those behind the firearm. I have a theory about how you get it from A to B. And I think the first step, you can't just go through B to get to C. You have to go from A to B. I've said this for a long time. I think the NRA needs to stop with the fear-mongering tactic. I think that whole fear narrative that they do just butts heads with society and creates this. I think what they have to start to do is almost for you guys, they have to, an IDPA would have to set aside some of its ego. Heads need to get together, and they need to make you guys the stars. They need to create almost like an ESPN. And the moment that the NFL changed, Max, and the UFC changes, they need to start to put the score on the bottom of the screen. They need to find a way to create a story along the way. And that's what Top Shot originally was meant to be.
Yeah.
But they need to be able to show the score of matches, and there needs to be a leaderboard, almost like a power rankings in the NFL. The minute it gets competitive like that, where people can follow it, because they say ratings went up exponentially in football the moment they started putting the score on the television screen. The moment they were able to put the screen, and I know that sounds dumb today.
Well, you're involved at that point.
You're involved at that point, and you have an emotional reaction. So the moment they're able to create that, and I think that's a marketing approach that the NRA sinks millions of dollars into all kinds of places. The moment they say, listen, we want to come in and we want to do this, and I think that we can enhance us and we can tell people's story in a better way and get away from being, now that's tough because it's a political organization, and I know we don't want to get into that, but the point is, it needs to become a true sport, and the only way it becomes a sport, and it is to you guys, is by showing the score and being able to track and follow your heroes and have it set up that way.
And that's the thing too. I think another thing you hit on there is being able to track the heroes is tell the story of the guys behind the gun too. I think that's another huge thing, because when I can connect, look, the NFL Network and all these other ESPNs and everything, when I can learn about who a Daniel Jones is, right? When I can learn about who these guys are that are coming onto the scene now.
You love them.
Yeah, it makes you feel connected. It makes you want to see their stories succeed. So you want to be a part of it. And with shooting, we're just not there, unfortunately, in the shooting world, in the competitive shooting sport. The general public, they won't get to see or hear those stories. And that's kind of the sad part of it. And once we do that, if we're able to tell that story, if we're able to get on the ESPN and all those things, which we were at one point.
Right.
I remember watching it years and years ago. And look, let me back up too, that I think our scoring system is way too hard to follow. If us as an organization can say, okay, let me change up this scoring system a little bit differently, or maybe let's make it an all-time scoring system, something that you can follow, or you have so much time and you have to knock down as many targets as you can. it's easy to track that
I
way.
think you can initially, the initial buy-in is create it like a BCS almost, have a power ranking system. And that'll get people engaged. That's where you start. How you fix it, I don't know. I'm not a mathematician, but I think at some point, yeah, you have to get to what you're talking about. Yeah. Will you get that out of the gate? No. But if you have some level of a power ranking system where you have like 5 people that vote and pick, and there's a prize at, if you finish at the top of the leaderboard, depending on matches won, time, whatever, however you do it. I don't know the answer to all of it because you have to get a few people in a room, not too many people because then there's too many chiefs. But you have to have a couple guys in there and you make a decision. And you live with it. And everybody hated the BCS in the beginning, and I get that. And then they went to a playoff system, but you have to get to that. And if you get to that, then it'll start to work itself out little by little, and it'll take time. But if you get together with the right brands, the right companies, and I love what you're saying about just humanizing the people behind the gun and getting their story out there. That was one of the catalysts behind this podcast, was to have people on that not only shoot, but they're all involved in the defense community. Whether that's fighting, whether that's shooting, whether that's instructing or training or all those things. But having those people on this, humanizing them, they might do things that are perceived as violent outwardly, but the reality is they're great people.
Yeah.
And they're just doing their job, and they're doing something that they love. And it's no different than working a lathe. I can throw a body in a lathe and chop it up into 20 pieces, but that doesn't make it this inhuman thing. But I think outwardly facing, there's a lot of people out there, and we'll get into it, that want to make shooting this inhuman thing. But it really is, and everybody in it's so great, and the folks are great.
Absolutely great industry, man. I'm very fortunate to be a part of it, and to be a part of it this long. I mean, I consider it to be one of the greatest industries in our world, in what we do. So I don't know. I just think there's so many situations that we can do better on, and I would love to be a part of that, whatever that would be, to help grow the sport, to help grow the industry. And it's a small industry, man, and that's what's so cool about it too, is everybody, we're a big industry, but we're a small industry in that we all can work together.
And there's a lot of people with cool ideas out there. I mean, Jonathan and I at Action have sat around and twisted our mustache on ideas and ways, but there are people out there with very good, cool ideas to make it right. But it's getting the right people together, and I think it comes down to money, Max, and you're going to have to pull in something like the NRA, someone that has a deep pocket.
Yeah, and that's something that we hadn't even brought up, right? It's money, and it's sponsorship.
Money.
I mean, there's only so much of that to go around, and I work for some great companies, and we get hit up every day for sponsorship on something, and we want to do it all, but you just can't.
You can't, and I do love that the industry's getting away from. Because when I first got in it, and I know you remember these days, it's like, oh, we'll give you a muzzle brake, and you're sponsored, and you're like, you can't do that shit no more. Like, it's like the industry shit. Finally, people are getting it. Like, it can't operate that way. So it's super exciting. It's super fun to be able to have you in here. I want to ask you one more really good question. What do you think of social media as it's come in and kind of become this thing, along your journey?
Yeah, it's that's a whole job in itself, man. I don't know if I love it or I hate it, but I just know it's part of the job now. I do my best to stay off of it as much as possible. I know that sounds crazy, but that's just me. I just try not to be on it too much. But I think it's a way to connect with people and to reach out to people in a way that I've never been able to do before. So that's the positive of it. The positive of it is I can not worry about what people say or not worry about how people may perceive me, but I can help other people through that application, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, the rest of it, the ways of connecting with people like we've never been able to do before. So I can tell my story the way I want to tell it. It's my television channel, right? It's my TV show. It's my podcast. It's my whatever. Nobody else is producing it. It's how I want the material to come across. And look, when I'm on social media, it's me. It's real. You're probably going to see something about guns, and you're definitely going to see something about my family.
And the New Orleans Saints.
And of course, and the Saints, yeah. Who didn't?
And the Saints, yeah. So what do you think of the podcasting coming in? Because that's been something that's kind of the last 2 years, 3 years been growing in favor. I'm a huge fan of it, obviously, but YouTube and podcasting is starting to become a thing as Instagram kind of, it's not that it's run its course, but it's doing its thing. What do you think of this as a new medium and a new platform?
I think it's great. I think it's an amazing opportunity for people to get the full story. Something like Instagram, Facebook, those are like quick glimpses, right?
Snippets.
They're little snippets where I love listening to people who are successful. I don't care what they're successful in. I love to hear their stories, how they got there, how they stay there, and where they're going next. And I think that's what podcasts can do for people. The Instagram stuff, not to get on a big rant on it, but Look, you look on Instagram and everybody's a world champion. Everybody's a,
Everyone's someone, just ask them.
Exactly. So that can get very frustrating for me, especially as a pro. As we talked about, there's only a few real pros out there that are trying to make a living at this, but everybody can, tell their story the way they want to tell it. And some of what I do for the greatest companies I work for are going through that. Hey, Max, we've had X, Y, and Z contact us for guns, ammo, and money. What should we do with that? And that's part of my job is saying, okay, this is good, this is not good, this is credible, this is not credible, because a lot of us just don't know, right? You see it and you're like, well, that guy's awesome because I see it on Facebook, I see it on Instagram, whatever. So it's a very challenging thing for me, believe it or not. Some of the meetings I sit in, it's like, hey, Max, why do you have, I don't even know what I have, man, 40-something, I don't know, whatever, however many thousands I have on Instagram, right? Why do you only have 40,000 followers on Instagram and this person has 300,000? It's like, it's a hard story to tell, right?
Because you're focused on winning. It's a different animal.
I mean, it's just, I do my best with it. I really do, man. But I don't want to say I'm old school. I just want to say that I use it for what I can help people with rather than pumping my own chest and saying this is who I am.
No, that's well said. I agree with you. And I think that, I said this once to someone, and someone said to me, they said, first of all, I always like people that are different. I think, you have to have layers. If you, at this point in the industry, if you just have Instagram, it's kind of like, okay, what else you got? Because that's not enough now. In my humble opinion, if you compete, that's another layer. Do you compete at a high level? Are you top of the table? But I think a lot of guys make the mistake of kind of resting on the laurels of one platform. And I think you have to have multiple platforms. So there's influencers, and I think the influencer wave is kind of dying down a little bit because there's just so many of them. Everybody's doing it. It's kind of become one of those things. The people that are really hitting a home run as media entities, if you will, Max, they're people that are kind of doing a little bit of everything. They have their hand in everything. They're telling their story across a different spectrum. I've always been a big fan of this platform because I'm a blabbermouth. And I can come out here and I can have folks tell their story. And I've made so many great friendships and relationships in the business through the years that I wanted nothing more than I felt like this was a giant piece missing around the business. And I felt like not a lot of guys that were doing it right. And I felt like someone like me that had the relationships could come in and do it in a way that everybody would be able to say, okay, I felt good about getting my story out there on this podcast or on this platform, and now it lives forever, and they can share it, right. And they can say, here's my story. It's an easy thing not to puff your chest out, but to say, hey, my story's been written. Here's a link. Go listen.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's real. It's not a snippet.
Mm-hmm.
It's and we can sit here for 4 more hours and probably not get it all out, right? But
right.
I think it's just great. It's a great opportunity to show people, especially your program and how you're working with so many different folks across the board. I think that's important because I look at people all the time, whether it be athletes, businessmen. I want to know more of how they got successful and where they got to, and rather than what they're eating today.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like that. So tell everybody where they can find you, what the best place to look you up is, because I know times we're in a time crunch. Q, pull up his IG, everything, and let everybody know what the best avenue to reach you is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the easiest way, man, is just old school.
There
it is, man. Look at that. So for me, Instagram, it's Max J Michel. Facebook is maxmichel.us and maxmichel.com as well as my website.
And what do you got going on next, and where can people find you?
Well, I'm actually here in Vegas. I'm driving a couple hours to Utah now to shoot the USPSA championships. I've won that 3 years in a row now. I'm the only person to ever win it with the Carry Optics division, our new division with the 6-hour P320 X5 with the Romeo 3 Max optic. I'm extremely excited to kind of go through that and to hopefully pull out another win. So that's obviously the next big focus. It's the reason why I'm here right now in the area. So I'm blessed to be here working with you while I'm here. But yeah, I mean that's the focus. That's the end goal for the year. I have a couple of more classes and some matches to do throughout this year. But the big one for me is Thailand 2020. This time next year, I'll be in Thailand competing for the World Championship.
Thailand, Q. We should go.
I do need some bodyguards.
Yeah, we should go, Q. Thailand. I could say some things, but I'm not going to. Yeah. We're going to keep it PG. But no, Max, I appreciate you coming out, and I appreciate you spending some time. I've been blessed to call you a friend for a while. you know, and I try my best not to abuse that. I know I harass you from time to time, but it's truly been an honor to be able to call you that and spend some time with you, you know, kind of just seeing how you work and seeing how you approach your business, man. And I love how you do it. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time.
No, absolutely, man. Happy to do it. And thank you for the opportunity. And obviously I feel the same way about you, man. That's why I'm here. I mean, and I get asked to do a lot of things and I don't, you know, want to do them all maybe, or I don't always do them, but for you, man, I was absolutely going to make it better.
I appreciate it. Goes without saying, and I love you for it. But big shout out to Sig. Shout out to the team there. Great crew. Awesome facility. If you ever get a chance to visit it, I know. You know, Max is up there from time to time. Training in a top secret area up there. But great facility and awesome academy. So big shout out to them. And I appreciate everyone over here at KVAR. Appreciate Q. I had an awesome time. And we're going to go eat some Jesse Ray's barbecue real quick before you shove off and you head over to Salt Lake. So we're out.